Imagine a world where a woman's worth was measured not by her heart, but by her womb. A world where a young widow, barely out of girlhood, could be stripped of her dignity, her future, and even her freedom, all because she could not bear a child. This isn't just a story. It's a window into a forgotten time, a testament to resilience, and a love story that defied every expectation. What if I told you that one woman's deepest sorrow became the unlikely key to her greatest joy? Her name was Eliza. At just 22, her husband was gone, and her life, by all accounts, should have ended too. She was infertile, a stark truth in a harsh land where a woman's purpose was to populate the vast, untamed West. This wasn't a minor setback. It was a death sentence in the eyes of society, leading to an unthinkable fate. Eliza was to be auctioned off. Yes, auctioned, like property, like livestock, her very being reduced to a commodity for sale. Everything you thought you knew about love and survival in the wild frontier is about to be challenged. How could a woman, cast aside and publicly shamed for a biological truth beyond her control, ever find happiness, let alone love? The stakes were not just her comfort, but her very soul. She faced a future defined by despair, an existence without purpose or affection. Every day she remained unsold was another day her hope withered. Then, the auction block. The ultimate humiliation, but what happened next changed everything. From the shadows of that brutal day, a figure emerged, a man unlike any she had ever known. He was a Comanche father of 6, a man of quiet strength and profound wisdom, whose life was as rich with family as hers was barren. He stepped forward, not with pity, but with a gaze that held something akin to understanding, perhaps even acceptance. This wasn't a story of rescue in the traditional sense. It was the beginning of an extraordinary journey. He bought her, not for her ability to bear children, but for reasons that would slowly, astonishingly, reveal themselves. What was he thinking? Why would a man with a full family take on a woman deemed unfit? The answer lies in the heart of the untamed frontier, where unexpected bonds were forged, and where a man's true character was revealed not by his wealth, but by his compassion. In the next 25 minutes, you will discover the hidden truth behind this impossible union. You will witness Eliza's transformation from a shamed, childless widow to a woman who found her everything in the most unexpected place. This is the untold story of a love that bloomed in the harshest soil, proving that the deepest connections are often found where we least expect them, and that true family is not always born of blood, but of an unbreakable spirit. The dust motes danced in the sparse shafts of sunlight piercing the saloon's grimy windows, illuminating the grim reality of Sarah May's situation. Just shy of her 25th birthday, Sarah May already carried the H.E.V. mantle of widowhood, a title that offered little solace and even less security in the harsh landscape of the untamed West. Her husband, Thomas, had been gone for 6 months, taken by a sudden fever that swept through the fledgling settlement of Harmony Creek like a prairie fire. His passing left Sarah May with a small, struggling farm, a handful of chickens, and a crushing debt to Mr. Ebenezer Crowley, the town's wealthiest and most unscrupulous merchant. Sarah May had tried everything to keep the farm afloat. She worked from sunup to sundown, her hands calloused and raw from tilling the unforgiving soil. She sold what eggs she could spare, mended clothes for the other settlers, and even tried her hand at baking pies, but the relentless drought and the ever-present shadow of Crowley's ledger made every effort feel futile. The farm, Thomas's dream, was slipping through her fingers like fine sand. Sarah May felt the weight of his unfulfilled promise pressing down on her, a constant ache in her chest. Then came the notice tacked crudely to the general store's bulletin board. Public auction, foreclosure sale. Crowley had wasted no time. The farm, Thomas's legacy, was to be sold to the highest bidder. Sarah May had stood before that notice, her heart a leaden weight, the words blurring before her tear-filled eyes. She had nowhere to go, no family to turn to, no means to escape the inevitable. The small community of Harmony Creek, while sympathetic, was struggling itself. There was no one to offer Sarah May a lifeline. The auction itself was a spectacle of quiet desperation. Neighbors averted their gazes, uncomfortable witnesses to Sarah May's public undoing. Mr. Crowley, a smug smile barely concealed beneath his walrus mustache, presided over the proceedings with an air of self-importance. The bids came in slowly, mostly for the land, the meager livestock, and the ramshackle cabin. Sarah May stood by, a silent, hollow figure, watching her life dismantled piece by piece. Then Crowley cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the hushed crowd. And finally, he announced, his gaze sweeping over the assembled men, we have the widow herself. Young, healthy, and fertile, I'm told. A good, strong woman for a man's home. Starting bid for Sarah May. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Sarah May felt the blood drain from her face, her knees threatening to buckle. She wasn't merely losing her home. She was being sold, her very person reduced to a commodity, her worth measured by her perceived ability to bear children. The humiliation was a physical blow, stealing her breath. This was her new reality, a terrifying precipice from which there seemed no escape. Sarah May, who had always prided herself on her quiet strength, felt utterly broken. The world had shrunk to the confines of this dusty saloon, and her future, once uncertain, was now terrifyingly clear. She was chattel, and her destiny was in the hands of the highest bidder, the saloon doors swung shut with a groan, muffling the sounds of the bustling street, but doing little to quiet the clamor within May's own mind. Her heart, a leaden weight in her chest, seemed to beat in time with the rhythmic thud of the auctioneer's gavel, a sound that promised to shatter what little remained of her world. May stood near the back, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white, her gaze fixed on the makeshift stage where her fate was about to be decided. Every whisper, every glance felt like a judgment, a confirmation of her utter helplessness. A hush fell over the room as Mr. Crowley, his corpulent frame barely contained by his expensive suit, stepped forward. A smug smirk played on his lips, a look May had come to despise. He cleared his throat, the sound amplified in the sudden silence, and began to speak. His words, smooth and oily, painted a picture of May that was both demeaning and false. He spoke of her as a fine, healthy woman, a hard worker, yet the subtext was clear. She was property, an item to be sold to the highest bidder, her worth measured only by her capacity to produce an heir. The humiliation burned in May's cheeks, a fire that threatened to consume her. She remembered Thomas's gentle hands, his dreams of a family, dreams that had died with him. The thought of being sold, not for her heart or her mind, but for her womb, was a bitter pill. A wave of nausea washed over May, and she gripped the back of a nearby chair to steady herself. She longed to run, to escape the suffocating gaze of the men who now openly appraised her, but there was nowhere to go. The farm, her home, was gone. Her meager savings were depleted. She was truly alone, adrift in a world that seemed determined to crush her spirit. The auctioneer's voice boomed, cutting through May's despair. Starting bid, $100. The number hung in the air, a stark reminder of her diminished value. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd, then a tentative bid from a grizzled rancher in the front row. May's stomach lurched. This was real. This was happening. Each new bid felt like a blow, driving her deeper into the abyss of despair. She closed her eyes for a moment, wishing she could disappear, wishing for a miracle to snatch her from the jaws of this nightmare. When she opened them, her gaze fell upon a man standing quietly in the shadows at the edge of the room. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a presence that commanded attention, even without speaking. His eyes, dark and unreadable, were fixed on her. May's breath hitched. A strange current seemed to pass between them, a silent acknowledgement across the crowded room. She had never seen him before, yet there was something profoundly familiar in the intensity of his gaze. He was a Comanche, she realized, noting the intricate beadwork on his buckskin tunic and the single eagle feather woven into his dark braid. His presence was both unsettling and inexplicably comforting. She felt a seeker of hope, fragile yet persistent, that perhaps this man, this stranger, held the key to her salvation. The auctioneer, a portly man with a booming voice, cleared his throat, pulling May's attention back to the harsh reality of her situation. All right, folks, let's get this show on the road. First up, we have the late Thomas Miller's farm, 40 acres, good well, sturdy cabin. What am I bid? A smattering of low bids followed, mostly from opportunistic farmers hoping to snag a bargain. May watched, her heart a leaden weight in her chest, as the numbers slowly climbed, never quite reaching the true value of the land Thomas had poured his life into. She knew Crowley had rigged this, ensuring the farm would sell for far less than it was worth, allowing him to swoop in and claim it for a pittance, further solidifying his hold on the town. Then came the moment she dreaded most. The auctioneer's voice dropped, laced with a false sympathy that made May's stomach churn. And now, folks, we have Mrs. Sarah May Miller herself, a young widow, strong hands, good health, and, well, let's just say she's available for a new life. What am I bid for Mrs. Miller? A hush fell over the saloon. May felt every eye in the room turn to her, their gazes a tangible weight, stripping her of dignity. She wanted to run, to hide, to disappear into the very dust motes dancing around her. Her cheeks burned with shame, and she clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. This was it. This was the ultimate degradation, the final act of Crowley's cruelty. Just as a snicker broke the silence and a rough voice called out a ridiculously low offer, a deep, resonant voice cut through the air. $100. The sound came from the shadows where the Comanche man stood. May's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. $100 was an astronomical sum, far more than anyone would pay for a widow, especially one considered barren by common gossip. All eyes turned to him, murmurs rippling through the crowd. Crowley's face, usually smug, contorted into a mask of surprise and irritation. He hadn't anticipated this. The Comanche stepped forward, emerging fully into the light. He was even more imposing up close, his presence radiating a quiet strength. His dark eyes, still fixed on May, held an unreadable depth, a mixture of resolve and something else she couldn't quite decipher. His gaze was unwavering, a silent promise in the chaos. May felt a strange mix of fear and an unexpected surge of hope. Who was this man, and why was he doing this? The auctioneer, a portly man named Silas, cleared his throat, his voice booming over the murmuring crowd. All right, folks, let's get back to business. We have a unique lot here, folks, one of a kind. Sarah May, widow of Thomas Caldwell. Bidding starts at $50. May flinched, the words striking her like physical blows. $50. Was that truly the value of a human life? Her life? A wave of humiliation washed over her, hot and stinging. She felt every eye in the room upon her, appraising, judging, some with pity, others with unconcealed avarice. The air grew thick with unspoken words, with the weight of her predicament. She wanted to disappear, to simply vanish from this awful place. Her gaze darted to the man who had just spoken, the Comanche, who still stood tall and unwavering. He hadn't flinched. He hadn't looked away. A hesitant bid came from the back, a reedy voice offering $60. Then another, $75. The bids rose slowly, agonizingly, each increment a fresh wound to May's dignity. She kept her eyes fixed on the man. His face remained impassive, his dark eyes never leaving hers. There was a quiet strength about him, a stillness that seemed to defy the chaos around them. She noticed the way his hand rested on the hilt of a knife tucked into his belt, a subtle gesture that spoke of readiness, of quiet power. Silas, the auctioneer, pounded his gavel. $100. Do I hear more? 100 for the young widow. May's heart hammered against her ribs. $100. It felt like a lifetime of servitude. She imagined herself toiling, forever bound to someone else's will, her dreams of the farm, of Thomas's legacy, fading into oblivion. A tear pricked at the corner of her eye, but she blinked it back. She would not cry. Not here. Not now. Then a voice, deep and resonant, cut through the din. $500. The room fell silent. Every head swiveled towards the sound. It was the Comanche. May's breath hitched. $500? It was an astronomical sum, far more than anyone else had bid, far more than she was worth, she thought, in the eyes of this crowd. A ripple of shock went through the onlookers. Silas, the auctioneer, looked momentarily stunned, his mouth slightly agape. $500. Silas finally managed to croak, his voice losing some of its booming authority. He looked at the other bidders, who merely shook their heads, clearly outmatched. Any other bids? The silence stretched, heavy and expectant. May felt a strange mix of terror and an exhilarating rush. $500. This man, this stranger, had just offered a fortune for her. Why? What did he want? Her mind raced, grappling with the implications of his actions. Was he a savior or simply a different kind of captor? She couldn't tell. His gaze, still locked on hers, offered no answers, only that unwavering, unreadable depth. Silas looked around one last time, then brought his gavel down with a resounding thud. Sold. To the gentleman for $500. The sound echoed in the sudden quiet, sealing May's fate. She was sold. But to whom? And what would become of her now? The man took a step forward, his eyes still on May, and for the first time, a flicker of something she couldn't quite name crossed his face. It wasn't triumph. Not exactly. It was resolve, and perhaps a hint of something else entirely. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a low rumble, surprisingly gentle for a man of his imposing stature. He introduced himself as Chayton, and the name, foreign and strong, seemed to fill the dusty air of the auction house. He explained, not to the gawking crowd, but directly to May, that he had 6 sons, all grown, and a sprawling ranch that needed a woman's touch. He spoke of the land, of the horses, and of the quiet life he envisioned. May listened, her initial fear slowly giving way to a strange sense of curiosity. This was not the future she had imagined, certainly not the one she had dreaded. The journey to Chayton's ranch was long, stretching across sun-baked plains and through whispering canyons. May rode beside him, a silent passenger in a new chapter of her life. She watched him, this man who had bought her freedom, observing the quiet strength in his hands as he guided his horse, the way his eyes constantly scanned the horizon, always watchful. He rarely spoke, but when he did, his words were thoughtful, deliberate. He answered her hesitant questions about his sons, about the ranch, about the Comanche ways he still honored. May learned that his wife had passed many years ago, leaving him to raise their boys alone. A shared understanding, born of loss, began to bridge the vast cultural chasm between them. Upon their arrival, May was met not with the harsh reality of servitude she had braced herself for, but with a bustling, vibrant home. Chayton's sons, all tall and strong like their father, greeted her with respectful nods and quiet smiles. The ranch, though rugged, was meticulously kept, a testament to their hard work and unity. There was an order, a rhythm to their lives, that May found surprisingly comforting. She began to find her place, not as a possession, but as a valued member of the household. She cooked, she cleaned, she tended to the small garden, and slowly, the calluses on her hands became less a mark of hardship and more a sign of purpose. Chayton never pressed her, never demanded anything more than her presence and her help. He simply observed, a quiet sentinel. He saw the way she nurtured the wilting rose bushes by the porch, the gentle patience she showed when teaching his youngest son to mend a tear in his buckskin shirt, the quiet dignity with which she carried herself. He saw her strength, her resilience, the spark of life that had been dulled by sorrow, but was now, slowly, rekindling. May, in turn, saw beyond his imposing exterior. She saw his kindness, his unwavering devotion to his family, his deep respect for the land and its creatures. She saw a man who, despite his own grief, had chosen to offer her a new beginning. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Chayton found May sitting on the porch, watching the stars emerge. He sat beside her, the silence between them comfortable, companionable. He spoke of his hopes for the ranch, for his sons, and then, his voice soft, than she had ever heard it, he spoke of her. He told her she brought light into their home, that her presence was a blessing. May looked at him, truly looked at him, and for the first time since Thomas's passing, she felt a stirring of something akin to hope, a fragile seed of possibility blooming in the vast, open landscape of her heart. The warmth of his words settled deep within May, a comfort she hadn't realized she so desperately craved. It wasn't just the promise of a home, but the quiet acceptance, the gentle understanding in his eyes that truly began to mend the fractured pieces of her spirit. She watched him interact with his children, a natural grace and authority in his movements, yet always with an underlying current of profound affection. He spoke of their future, not as a fleeting dream, but as a solid, tangible thing they would build together, brick by emotional brick. May found herself drawn into the rhythm of their lives, a stark contrast to the solitary existence she had known. She learned to grind corn, to prepare venison in ways she'd never imagined, and to understand the subtle nuances of the Comanche language. The children, initially reserved, soon flocked to her, sharing their stories, their laughter echoing through the lodge. Little Bluebird would often sit by her side, braiding wildflowers into May's hair, while Strong Bear would proudly show her the intricate carvings he made from wood. Each day, the fragile seed of possibility that had bloomed in her heart grew stronger, its roots deepening into the fertile ground of belonging. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, he took her hand. They sat by the flickering fire, the air cool and still. He spoke of his first wife, not with sorrow, but with a quiet reverence, explaining how she had been a guiding light, and how May had now brought that same light back into their lives. He told her she was strong, resilient, and that her spirit had a beauty that transcended any hardship. He saw her, truly saw her, not as a widow burdened by loss and debt, but as a woman capable of great love and immense joy. May looked into his dark, steady eyes, and for the first time in years, she felt completely seen, completely valued. The weight of Thomas's passing, the crushing burden of Crowley's debt, the humiliation of the auction, all of it began to recede, fading into the distant past. Here, in this vast, untamed land, surrounded by a family that had embraced her without reservation, May found her true home. She had been auctioned for her supposed infertility, deemed worthless by the standards of a world that had almost broken her. Yet, this Comanche father of 6, this man who saw beyond her past and into her heart, had made her his everything. She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. The future, once a terrifying void, now stretched before her, rich with promise and the quiet certainty of love. May H. had lost everything, only to gain a life far richer, far more fulfilling than she could have ever imagined. Her journey had been arduous, marked by loss and despair, but it had led her to this unexpected haven, to a love that was as vast and enduring as the prairie itself. She was no longer just May, the widow, but May, the cherished wife, the beloved mother, a woman finally free to embrace her destiny. May watched the children playing, their laughter echoing through the small cabin she now called home. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunbeams, illuminating the simple, yet profoundly rich, life she had built. No longer was she the terrified, auctioned widow, her worth measured only by her womb. That distant, painful past felt like a lifetime ago, a shadow from which she had emerged into the warmth of genuine belonging. Her hands, once idle and unsure, now moved with purpose, kneading dough for the evening's bread. Each rhythmic press was a testament to her newfound strength, a quiet celebration of the skills she had learned and the confidence she had gained. The fear of infertility, which had once loomed like a dark cloud, had dissipated under the expansive sky of Comanche love. It wasn't about bearing children, she realized, but about nurturing life in all its forms, the lives of these 6 spirited children, the life of her marriage, and the life within herself that had finally blossomed. She remembered the initial trepidation, the whispers of doubt from the white settlers, the uncertainty of a world so different from her own. Yet, with each passing day, with every shared meal, and every quiet moment under the vast western stars, those doubts had faded. Her husband, the strong, silent Comanche father, had never once made her feel less than whole. He had seen beyond her past, beyond societal expectations, and had simply seen May. He had offered not just a home, but a sanctuary for her spirit, a place where her heart could finally unfurl. A gentle hand touched her shoulder, and she turned to find him standing there, his eyes dark and deep, reflecting a love that needed no words. He simply smiled, a rare, comforting gesture that spoke volumes. She leaned into his embrace, feeling the solid strength of him, the quiet reassurance that this was where she belonged. The journey had been long and fraught with peril, but it had led her here, to a life far richer than she could have ever imagined. She was not just a wife, not just a stepmother, but a cherished member of a family, a woman finally free, her heart overflowing with a peace she once believed impossible. The setting sun painted the horizon in hues of orange and purple, a fitting end to a day, and a beautiful beginning to a life truly lived.